Welcome to pop.0 with Bryan Chaffin and John Kheit.
Today is Wednesday, November 29th, 2017, and this is a video podcast, sort of, for the Mac Observer. I am Bryan Chaffin, editor-in-chief for TMO.
And I am John Kheit, one half of Two Handsome Men. And as always...
Wait, is there someone guest hosting today? I
just slipped that by without anyone noticing. As always, you're too sharp and quick. All right. And as always, we have, well, not as always, but we have 3.5-ish topics. And
we have 3 topics and we're lying because we have 4. We might be lying about that.
Right, exactly. And they are topic number 1, Apple security, FUBAR, SNAFU, Palooza.
Ooh, I like that.
Bitcoin bubble or bust. Topic
Palooza.
3, Tesla bubble or bust.
Palooza.
And topic number 3.5-ish, a little Oak Island, perhaps recap. And
love Oak Island, man.
So, you wrote several pieces on this, so you're probably better. Well, you're almost always better to give backstory and actual facts on things than I.
I would argue with you, but then I'd be lying. All right, so let's start off with the thing that Apple did. It was found on Wednesday. It's not in Sierra or El Cap. So at some point it was slipped into High Sierra, but it was just publicly announced on Wednesday. So on November 28th. Who knows how long it's been there?
And what is the it?
The it is the worst, most catastrophic security bungle. Like this dwarfs anything that Microsoft or any other company has done that I can think of. And basically there was a bug, there was a flaw in High Sierra that allowed someone to log in as root without any kind of password. Like you type in root for the username, you leave the password field blank, and you log in and you have root access to that Mac. Everything.
Let me give you my expression.
Wait, hold on. I missed your expression because I was trying to look up something and I didn't have that. I didn't have that window. Where's my window? Oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. Too many windows.
You pick a screen, man.
I'm sure it's probably the best expression that anyone's ever had.
Yeah, that's probably not true. Yeah, it was basically, the Home Alone, you got to be fucking kidding me.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. This is unbelievable. This is like Apple's getting, deservedly so, the biggest corporate black eye that Apple has ever gotten. Like, of all the haters out there that always want to like talk smack about Apple stuff, most of the time they're wrong. Anyone talking smack about Apple on this has a right to do so.
So yeah, this is going to be tough in that we, of course, completely agree. There is one thing. So, oh, by the way, for people that don't know what root is a super user in Unix, and it's almost every, I'm pretty sure actually every Unix still includes a root user. Apple disables root by default, and you could enable it if you have a reason to use it, but almost no one should ever use root. It makes your system horrendously insecure because root has read-write access to everything on the system, to every user, to every daemon, to every config file. Nothing is off. It could launch any process, do any malicious, or just do anything on the system. And it's highly inadvisable to ever use root unless you know what you're doing, and even then sparingly. And most smart users disable root. And what's weird here is root by default for most people is disabled, and there's never been a password configured, but something in the configuration settings basically let you put in 0 password, hit enter, and you could log in as root either as a user or at the command line, and then go to town. And heaven help you if you have remote access systems enabled on your Mac, that means people could remotely log in for I don't know, weeks or months, for however
Who
long,
knows how long?
and have done malicious things. Now, thankfully for myself, since the world revolves around me, I enabled root a long time ago and had a password on it. And so if you had that, you were actually safer. And you know, our friend Jeff, I don't know if you guys did you talk about how he had a peculiar weird bug that even adding the root password didn't fix it for him initially?
You know, we didn't talk about that we didn't publicize it or talk about it because it was so specific to something weird he had going on in his machine, that it didn't really seem like a significant talking point.
I think it is. I think more people than just he potentially have that problem, because what happens is when root doesn't have a password and it makes a change to your system because you ran a system update of some kind, Unix has a certain set of permissions when it had that non-enabled password, and there were still things running as admin, that after you add the password, the Unix system interprets the now root with a password almost as a different user. So any changes that were made on a system update, potentially with root being disabled and having no password, can be interpreted by the system as a different user. And so even after he added the password, he could still log in. And the only solution to that was
as
to
root.
run.
He could still log in as root.
Right. Even though he added a password, you could still log in as root without a password, because there's like some cached vestigial crap in the system. And the only fix to that was, I suggested to him, and luckily it worked, was to run permissions fix on the system, change the password, and then that should stick in it. And it did stick for him. But you'd be surprised. A lot of people aren't technical enough to understand this, and they could have run that as a end round and still been stuck with it. Hopefully, you know, Apple's fixed now that they posted within a day, which is credit. At least they did it.
Right. So there were two things. One, there was a workaround where you enable root and you put a password on, and for most people that appeared to block this particular flaw. Or if you already had a password, of course, on root, you were good to go. And then early on Thursday morning, it was less than 24 hours later, Apple did have a patch, and Apple said that it was force installing that.
Yeah, I didn't even run the installer; it ran by itself on my system.
And I'm okay with that, by the way.
Yeah, so this is the greatest security fuck up, I think, in the history of all security fuck ups. And I was trying to think, I'm like, could you do something worse than leave root with no password? And I'm like, yes. If
really,
yes, you're gonna enjoy this. If Apple took your iCloud data and just shipped it to known criminal hackers in Russia and China, and with all your credit card information and stuff like that, and said, had a note on there that said, please fuck me as much as humanly possible, that would be worse.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, fair enough. That would be worse. Or Apple could just even publicly like release everybody's login and credit card information. So I guess there are some things that could technically be worse, but this is actually well beyond anything that I thought Apple could possibly do, because they've got such a great record on getting most security things pretty right.
As of late, Apple quality of kind of care and attention to detail and quality assurance has gone in the toilet. And they just fixed the letter I flipping to a box a few days ago, and then Jeff just today posts another thing where autocorrect now changes the word it into capital I period T and is into I capital S. It's like a fucking week later. There's another fucking autocorrect fuck up. So their attention to detail has gone to shit. And this kind of is a segue into the second part of the topic, is who's the fucking blame for this shit? Where does the buck stop? there were some posts, people calling for Craig Federighi's head, but one, I like Craig, so I'm going to defend him a little bit. But two, I know in 2010 and 11, they had a senior VP role that was Apple-wide for security. There was a security dude. I looked in their leader page. They don't have a security person anymore, but I suspect they still have a senior VP of security. And I think that's the person with whom the buck stops. Like, you don't expect Steve Jobs to, sit and test security personally. Yes, the buck stops with Steve and Cook ultimately, but and I think they just had a security guy leave like a year ago that was a really good guy, and it sounds like they haven't replaced him and they clearly did need to replace him with someone of greater value, because this is a beyond a shit show.
Yeah, this is something.
This is so bad. I'm going to be really fearful if Apple doesn't publicly note people being fired over this, because this is like criminal negligence level shit. I've never heard of a fuck up of this magnitude.
Well, yeah, and let's explain a little bit of that, John, because this might be Greek to some people to a certain extent. So root access gives you access to everything on a computer. For instance, with root access, I could delete your user folder, all your data gone.
Yep. Or encrypt it.
Or encrypt it. Or I could. This is my big scare scenario. Someone walks up to a Mac, be it your spouse's, be it one in the library, be it at a freaking hospital, some business, a government installation. They use this. They log in as root. They install a keylogger. They log out. They walk away, and the whole thing would take, for someone who knew what they were doing, a minute. Especially if you had an installer set up where you could just go visit it on a web page real quick. And I guarantee you that in the hours this was open, I can't guarantee it, but yet I feel confident saying I guarantee it, that happened to untold numbers of computers in the window between this flaw being disclosed and it being patched.
Yep.
There are too many Macs out there, and in very important places. Not to mention, of course, one in your home.
You've touched upon this, and we may have even touched upon it here. Bad hackers, they know about lots of security flaws that they don't share with others because they like to have it in their pocket for whatever it is that they do. And who knows, people have known about this flaw.
Yeah.
And how it was being exploited. You just don't know. So hi to Rick, and I, sorry if I'm mispronouncing this, Einschund, and Lars Boy. How you doing? So yeah, I just don't know. Who knows what the damage is? Again, to their credit, they fixed it fast. To their discredit, and much more profoundly, it is, again, the single greatest security fuck up of all time that I've ever heard of. Nothing, you'd made a great point. Nothing Microsoft has ever done can even come close.
Yeah, and I mean, like, we have heaped scorn on Microsoft for stupid security things, and this is I just can't overstate. Neither one of us can overstate the importance of this, and I wouldn't blame anyone using this as a reason not to buy Macs, be it at the corporate level, the government level. The governments of that I know of, Reuters reported that the governments of Germany and the U.S. Advised Mac users to please install this patch immediately. I was like this got mainstream coverage from CNN, the Washington Post, Reuters, the Guardian UK. This got mainstream coverage everywhere. It was on at least one segment of CNN. It was probably on CNBC, but I didn't watch CNBC today or yesterday. I mean, this is just a catastrophically stupid thing to happen.
So first of all, thank you for correcting me and noting that your name is phonetically stated as Ancient Alien.
Oh my goodness!
So welcome to this podcast. You
Yes,
cannot imagine. That's awesome. All right, Ancient. Thanks. Yeah, I agree. So here's the question: is who is to blame for this? In my opinion, if there is a security guy, clearly it falls on his lap. Do you think that Craig is kind of responsible to this if the security guy reports to him?
You know, I don't want to see Craig fired over this. I think that Craig is probably one of the standouts at Apple. I think that Craig gets responsibility. Tim gets responsibility. I mean, you know, in that whomever. There is a point. There's the person that's responsible, but then I think everybody that person reports to gets some of the blame as well.
So here's my feeling on this. If there is a senior VP of security like there used to be, and I should bring up that guy, the webpage for him. If there's still a position like that, the buck clearly.
Well, the buck stops at whoever hasn't done what they needed to do to hire someone fitting. Apple has all the money in the world, right? We talk about that all the time.
This is where I would blame Craig and or Tim. The guy that we can't remember his name that left a year ago that was in charge of a lot of security. If he was not properly replaced, I blame them, right? Like to leave a hole like that, a mistake.
Yeah.
They have a guy. This is one of those things where it's not acceptable, but I do get on any given day, any of us could have not eaten our Wheaties and had a really bad day, and this guy really had a bad day, and it's probably a fireable bad day. But ultimately, there's got to be if there is no security dude, then yeah, I'm starting to question Tim Cook and Federici's competence, because there has to be a security guy. So here's this is going back a while, but before this guy got fired because of the iPhone 4 S prototype, but right around 2011 when the phone was lost, and he was a former
right.
He got fired, but he was senior VP of global security. So I'm assuming there's still some kind of VP of global security at Apple, and whoever that fella is having a bad.
Yeah, someone is having a bad day right now for sure. And I don't want to see Apple scapegoat somebody. I want to see blame fall where it needs to fall. And I also want to see more of an apology. A pedantic note: he wasn't senior VP of global security; he was just VP of global security.
Yeah, you may be right.
But at least that's what his LinkedIn profile said. I had an excellent point.
That you want Apple to have some kind of apology.
Yes, thank you. Apple apologized through Reuters. They released a statement to Reuters saying that we apologize to Mac users, and we've begun we're auditing our development process to make sure this never happens again. That's fine and dandy. I want to see more than that. Like, this is a much worse debacle than Maps. I made this point on the Apple Context Machine today with Jeff Gamet. This is a much bigger mistake than the Maps rollout. When Tim wrote a letter and he wanted Scott Forstall to sign off on it, Scott refused and ended up getting fired. And Tim put out the open letter apologizing for Apple Maps. This is much worse. We need more than a statement apology. Like, Apple needs to own up to the fact that they breached our trust and that they're going to work hard to regain it. Blah blah blah.
Right. Lars Boy brings up an interesting question that's somewhat related to that, I think, which is he asks that, can you explain where in the OS development this would be checked, and is it necessary for OS development at all, and having root open allow developers to work on the OS? So one, you don't need root available for general development at all. You just use the dev kit, and the dev kit probably has some kinds of root access, but you don't need it as a user when you're doing development. You just run it, and it's got its own little sandbox thing. So it's not needed for development at all. Where would it be checked? Well, look, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on how companies run this, but I think it needs to be independent, meaning there should be someone in Apple running all kinds of black hat hacks at the system after
I believe that they do that.
Right. With buffer overflows and common attacks on the system that are known out there, script kiddie stuff, all kinds of malware, and they should be continually testing that. And yeah, one of them is to check that the goddamn root password's been fucking set. So that needs to be hey Rick, yeah, it asks for permissions when you install, but when I do builds, when I do code builds on Xcode, you don't need anything for it. It just runs it. You could test it, and you could but on initial setup, yeah, it needs the root access. So
I've got a theory here. I've got a theory that this was
good,
a toggle, and that it was for some reason open during development and didn't get toggled back off when it was compiled for release.
You know, Jeff properly shamed me in our tech group. It's a good thing for me to be shamed regularly, regardless of the topic. But you know, he does the right thing where he leaves root disabled, and in this case, it actually bit him on the ass because having root enabled with a password was helpful. But the right thing to do is you actually disable root for when you don't need it, and the few times you need it, you enable it, right? Use it and then disable it. So it's kind of good hygiene and the right thing to do. And now I forget why I was going to analogize that to what you just said. What did you just say?
I was saying that I thought it was a toggle.
Right. So it's kind of like that. There are certain things that are hygiene that should never be done. And one of those is never fucking leave root with zero password on, you know, enabled in any way, even toggled for a minute. I think that's bad hygiene on anything that's going to hit. But on the other hand, I do understand how like I said,
yeah, people do make mistakes.
Yeah, have a bad day. So it is what it is. But to your point, and I think tying this into Lars' question, which is, I'd like to see a report where they say, we figured out how this was fucked up, who fucked it up, why it was fucked up,
yeah,
and why it's not going to happen again, and how it was.
I'd like to see that too.
Because the understanding why will make me have a lot more confidence. Even if the why is, there was just a dude that fell asleep drunk at the thing and his face smashed the keyboard and, you know, sent this out and it shouldn't have been sent out. And we're going to, no, that guy's fired. And we have a quality check on anything like that ever happening again in the future, whatever it is. Anyway, yeah, I don't, if there's a security person, my guess is the buck stops there, but everyone's got a black eye over this at Apple. And it unfortunately adds to the narrative that I will get you and Jeff to admit to at some point. It will happen, which is Apple just doesn't fucking care. And it's shown by their actions day after fucking day after day, and particularly about the Mac.
Hard for me to argue against that in the face of this. And I do feel like increasingly they don't care about the Mac, which is, I've told you this, I've said it elsewhere. I've always rested comfortable in the knowledge that Apple needed Macs to make iPhones. And my question at this point is, like, you guys, like, is Apple somehow losing sight of that?
Again, you know, you're trying to apply logic to irrationality. It's kind of like, well, logically, Nero should not be playing the fiddle as Rome burns. Of course, that's the logical conclusion. But he played the fucking, you know, fiddle while Rome burned, nonetheless. So whatever.
But pedantically speaking, it was probably a Katara. But go ahead.
Jesus fuck it. All right, point taken. But but the other thing is, Tim Cook. People are conflating Tim Cook's success at something with his many failures and getting confused by it. I think Tim Cook deserves credit for surviving a very difficult period where an icon like Steve Jobs dies, and it could have been company ending immediately, and he got past well, and he deserves super credit for that. That doesn't mean he has been consistently good at running Apple. It just doesn't. He's failed as a manager because he's failed to notice that they can't scale, one, and then address that with infrastructure. And he's an operations guy, so this is all within his wheelhouse. I'm not asking him to pull, you know, some kind of crazy new vision out of his ass like Steve would. I'm talking about operations level shit, that they're fucking late with shit all the time, that they have bad QA, that when there's drift and badness in the development of their operating systems and software and products, that he's not addressing that from a managerial standpoint. And frankly, I think these days he's just not paying attention and doesn't give a fuck. And well, yes, he did great on a very difficult thing that maybe almost no other human being could have done, and he deserves credit for that. But nonetheless, what have you done for me lately? And well,
so this is probably more of a tangent than we want to go into, and we've kind of gone over some of these things in the past. But I think where you don't give, either you're not giving Tim enough credit, or I'm giving Tim way too much credit, and that is the big picture stuff that we haven't seen yet. And I think that's where his mind is.
Dude, you've been talking and he's been talking about that deep pipeline for too fucking long. And again, I'm going to live to see the day where you and Jeff admit he is not criticized nearly enough for his failings. He has some things that he deserves credit for, but he's been like, this Teflon guy that thou shalt not talk about in a negative way. And this cocksucker has...
Everybody talks about Tim in a negative way. What are you talking about?
You haven't. And a lot of the Mac press hasn't.
What do you mean I haven't? You're nuts. I have heaped my criticism on Apple for not iterating on Macs and iPads in particular.
Not Apple. Tim Cook. Please tell me all the ways that you've been critical about Tim Cook.
The fact that the Apple wasn't iterating on Macs and iPads.
After I browbeat you for how many years, you finally caved on that.
Okay, you were shifting the goalposts. You were totally shifting the goalposts. Okay. That's one, true. You absolutely cottoned on to this particular issue before I did. Two, you helped me see the light on it. But three, for the last several years, I've been highly critical of Apple and Tim Cook for not iterating on Macs and iPads. So don't tell me that I don't speak ill of Tim Cook. I'm just saying he needs to get credit, or he will eventually get credit for these big picture things.
For the deep pipeline.
The deep pipeline. Yep.
So I got you to admit to that, and yes, I was shifting goalposts. You're absolutely right, and you caught me red-handed. And two, but I need you then, you and Jeff, to confess that he sucks at management, big picture management stuff that he has core competency in, and he's failed at. And not just for the lack of iteration, but I'm talking about structurally for the company as well. And you know what I'm talking about.
I do. I think though that I think that he has a different skill set than a certain other Apple CEO.
Well, yeah, I can't say that Steve was well known for his operations and his management structure thing. Although you're right, when you kind of look at it, he did build pretty good management teams that worked for his circumstances.
Yeah.
Not done the same for his circumstances.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to give you that. In particular, Tim hasn't found somebody that can obsess over the details like Steve did.
And you know what? Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I think you're right on that. But to me, it's more the structure. Like, he hasn't noticed their failure to scale, and he hasn't thought and investigated what are solutions for that managerial poor structure managerially.
Yeah, and also, like, so let's for the sake of argument, let's say that my thesis that the reason why 2016 was so miserable and the first half of 2017 and then the last part of 2015 even, that the reason why those were so miserable is because the design team in particular was focused on Apple Park. Just for the sake of argument, let's make that the case. Apple should, Tim Cook should not have allowed that to happen. Even if that is the reason, it should not have been allowed to happen. Apple should have been able to walk and chew gum at the same time.
And the HomePod not shipping, is that still because they're fussing with the doorknobs in the building? And this security breach, is that also because of that? Like, when?
Well, I hope that the HomePod not shipping, the problem is I don't think that this is the case. But what I hope is that the reason why HomePod isn't shipping is because they realize their mistake with focusing on music.
I heard, yeah, I think that was during your daily observations podcast, and I agree. I pray that's the case, because I mean, like, how much?
But I don't think it is.
Yeah, I mean, they're so fucked. The other thing is, like, are you guys so fucking just, sniffing each other's farts that you can't hear the cacophony of people asking for this blatant feature that would only make you money and would only strengthen your whatchamacallit, your ecosystem more? Like,
not only strengthen the ecosystem, but do exactly what they say that they want to do, which is to be where we live our lives. Right? We've gotten that twice. We've gotten that from Phil Schiller. We've gotten that from Tim Cook. So why don't you go ahead and actually do this?
So I'd like to know again, when is it? Can we stop using the round spaceship building as an excuse for every fucking incompetent thing they do?
It's not an excuse. I'm listen. Hold on a second.
That no longer an okay excuse.
Hold on a second. It was never an excuse. It was me looking for the reason, looking for the missing information for what appeared to be irrational behavior.
Okay.
And I finally found what I think is the missing information, that their design team in particular was all off obsessing over doorknobs and flooring material.
I apologize to you, Mr. Pedantic. You're shooing by the goalpost here.
No, this isn't pedantry. These are facts. It was never intended. I've never offered that as an excuse. It's always been that's why.
I misspoke. I apologize. Not an excuse. When is it become reasonable to say that this can no longer be the real reason, and it's just that they don't give a fuck and suck? How far from the development of this fucking spaceship can that no longer be a plausible reason? That's what I was getting at. That's what I was getting at.
I didn't realize that's what you were getting at. I don't have an answer for that, because I actually think that Apple's more or less back on track now. So even with this particular debacle, how can I say that? That's an excellent question, John.
The HomePod not shipping for the Christmas season, that's awesome. They're firing on all cylinders. So again, how long from the fucking spaceship can we go before we stop saying that has any remotely plausible chance of being the cause?
We have, God, you're being such a turd. 2017, with the exception of the HomePod being delayed, right? 2017 has been a good year for products again.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is whether or not this is its own blip or the start of, like Apple being back on track. And we don't know that yet.
Okay, Mr. Optimist. So I'm going to take that as you're still going to use that even next month and next year, that when they fucked up, it still has some tie into the fucking spaceship. Again, I'd like to know what year I can finally stop looking at the spaceship as some proximate cause, potentially, of their fucking up. And you will actually get on board and just say, it's just because they don't give a fuck and they're incompetent.
Have you considered, starting to use your Pixel Book and your Pixel and stuff like that? Because,
dude, you laugh,
clearly Apple does not make you happy.
Dude, you laugh, but listen, I've got a fucking Mac Pro that is literally melting down from just being so fucking old that I would like to replace. And at this point, my choices are fucking build a Hackintosh or go to like Linux or something. And God help, dude, if you think I'm bitching now, if they release a motherfucking Mac Pro that does have a soldered in motherfucking SSD drive, dude, you're gonna hear bitching. You're gonna want to kill yourself or me or both.
No. I'm gonna grab firewood and I'm gonna help build that fire, man.
It's unfucking believable. So, and I'm looking forward to an iMac Pro that costs fucking $10,000 that has a soldered in 4 terabyte drive that makes that machine a fucking brick in 3 years, when that machine should be lasting quite a bit longer. I mean, it's all right. I'm gonna try to fucking take a chill pill. Yeah, I'm pissy. I'm pissy because I got a fucking 7-year-old machine I can't fucking upgrade. I'm saying, Apple, please take $10,000. Take my fucking $10,000, please, you motherfuckers. Just update a fucking machine. And I'm pissy. Yeah, because my machine's fucking melting down. That's why I'm pissy. And I'm a pissy person in general. That too.
Yes, you are.
Anyway. Have we beaten that fucking dead horse?
Yeah, we have. We had a question come in, right? I had a question on Twitter. like come in like seconds ago, if I can find it. The by the way, why the hell doesn't Twitter update its Mac client to the new 280 character limit?
You know, I don't really tweet, so you're the better expert at this than I.
Yeah. So Michael Goff asked, do we know why Apple hasn't thrown billions at Siri in an effort to get the HomePod version of it so much better than the competition? Or am I oversimplifying things? In that this is related to this. I think that the issue is that Apple seemed to decide that music was more important, that Sonos was the competitor and not Alexa. Not Amazon Alexa.
Apple is run. So I have an answer for him, and you have not. I don't think plausibly denied my theory on here. Apple is run by retarded ADD toddlers, and they bought Siri, lobotomized it by removing a lot of capability that it had when it was run independently, and then they polished it up real nice for their launch, and then they had ADD because they wanted to go work on the watch or whatever, and there's no one left to continue development of it. And Apple does this time and time again. They did a great job with the original iWorks. They release it, and then the ADD toddler went and saw a butterfly or a fucking squirrel or something and got distracted, and then it's abandoned. Every project, no matter how major that they release, gets abandoned. And in some sense, the people that run this company are profoundly well suited to being a phone company executives, because all they care about is the next phone, right? So because they get to abandon the previous phone, they get to burn it like a sailboat, like dudes that do the America's Cup and burn the previous. They don't give a damn about whatever happened before because they're on to the next version of the sailboat. But they don't care about any of the other stuff that other people that they made people care about. People care about Siri, but they don't. People care about Macs, but they don't. People care about.
I think they do care about Siri. I think they do care about Siri.
Yeah, well, it doesn't show in their actions. Please don't spare me the rhetoric of the long pipeline. I'm talking about actions, actual products released and put out. So by that standard, they don't give a fuck about it. To this day, I can't fucking teach it a new fucking word. Seriously, what the fuck? I had to put in double entries for fucking Arvin's contact to teach it the word fucking Arv. That's your, if you want to teach it a word that it can't fucking understand as a nickname for someone, you have to make a duplicate entry in your contact book, because that's a reasonable thing for grandma to figure out.
I've had the same problem. I had a friend of mine whose nickname was Ant, and I even tried making him AUNT, Ant Tony, and that wasn't working. I couldn't call Ant. Couldn't, and I've had the same problem with Nick. So yeah, fair enough. I hear you.
They don't give a fuck about iTunes. They don't give which is only the major interface to working the fucking iPhone.
You know what I think, man? I think that Apple needs to expand its goddamn executive team. They
need to develop an infrastructure that makes them not behave like ADD retarded toddlers.
Yep.
That as soon as they finish a product, it becomes abandonware. iTunes was abandoned. iWorks was abandoned. All these things are abandoned because they can't fucking focus on anything but, wrist strap fucking colors now. That's all they give a fuck about. And I know forever the spaceship is the real excuse for why they were distracted.
It was never an excuse. It was a reason. Stop putting that shit in my mouth, man.
Button pushing, and I love it. All right. So we killed that like
let's move on.
15 minutes ago. So we've really killed it now. So fuck Apple. That's my summary for that topic. Okay, another calm topic, the Bitcoin bubble.
That's a good one.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what Bitcoin is, since you've been running Bitcoiny stuff in your faucet thing for a while, and you could give some good background and kind of we can discuss it then.
Right. So Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. It uses a technology called the blockchain. What Bitcoin really is an open ledger. And it is a public ledger that is viewable by anyone and everyone. And in that it uses numbers to identify transactions. It's what is called pseudonymous. So it's not anonymous, it's pseudonymous. And the reality is that at this point, the U.S. has thrown enough resources, and probably other governments as well, to be able to tie most Bitcoin addresses to individuals. So it's really mostly pseudonymous to average or ordinary people.
So the reason Bitcoin is in the news right now like crazy is its crazy valuation. And I have here on screen kind of the current Coinbase, which fuck Coinbase. God, it's such a shit show of a site to use. I think you use, would you say GDX?
Well, so Coinbase is an online wallet that also allows buying and selling of Litecoin, Ethereum, and Bitcoin.
Right.
And they also own GDAX, GDAX, and it's GDAX.com, I believe. See if that's, yep, GDAX.com, which is their trading platform. So with GDAX.com, you can do limit orders and stop orders and spot orders, and they're charging at 0.25% per transaction as opposed to a much higher percentage that they're doing on.
Wow, so you can see here like
Coinbase.
grades. It's pretty tickery here.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is I've seen someone. There was a. If you could look here, back in 2013, it was going for like $13, right, for a Bitcoin. Today, it hit a high of $10,191 for one Bitcoin. So the rough math is, if you bought early on in the 2013 frame and held $1,000 of Bitcoin, you would have more than $1 billion worth of Bitcoin today. You'd be a billionaire just by holding on to it. And what's interesting is, so this is the Bitcoin, but these other currencies have followed similar trends. I can't go back to 2013, but let's do a year back. So here's kind of the graph for Bitcoin over a year, and it's up like 1,200%. And if we go to Ethereum, it's up 5,100%, so even better. Or was that 12,000%? Let me just see. No, yeah, so Ethereum's up even better. Ethereum, unlike Bitcoin, it has, in my opinion, something that makes it superior to Bitcoin. I'm not sure about all the security ramifications, but it has a processor payload. You could tell an Ethereum coin to basically do not only smart contracts, which is like, if you and I make a bet, if some football team, wins, you get the money, and if the other team wins, I get the money, kind of thing, or whatever. If the weather on a certain date is over this temperature, you get the money and I get the money, kind of thing. But you could also have computational payloads, which is very interesting and makes Ethereum kind of really interesting. And maybe
there's all kinds of business oriented features built into Ethereum that makes it very, very compelling from a business use standpoint.
And Litecoin is also up 2,000% over just the last year. So there's been a crazy rise in value of these things. And in the tech group, I kind of bitched and said, this seems to me like a bubble, like a tulip thing, because the reality I was purporting was that if everyone is buying this and just holding it but not using it, it's kind of like a tulip. There's no real use for it. And if I saw that Amazon started taking Ethereum or Bitcoin or something like that, then it changes things, because people would actually start using it. But other than criminals and people buying pot and stuff over the internet, it's generally kind of people are buying it to hold it because everyone else is buying into the hype. And the hype is so bad, it reminds me of the .com bubble. For those that weren't around for it, you knew that there was a bubble coming when, like, the guy at the checkout was for your groceries was saying, yeah, I think I'm going to go buy some CMGI today. And you're like, Jesus fuck. It's just people that don't know what the fuck they're talking about are just buying in this because it's the, quote, no one can lose, end quote, scenario. And then, of course, the market crashed hard. And the other day, one of our friends, Brandon, was on the subway, and you can't make this shit up. A guy was like, yeah, I think I'm going to use some of my welfare money to buy Bitcoin. And you're like, wow, this shit sounds like bubble stuff. But then someone else in our tech group noted that you can just go to overstock.com and overstock.com and pay with Bitcoin.
Yeah, overstock.com is the biggest retailer taking Bitcoin right now, and they're doing millions. He's actually, I'm trying to look it up right now, seeing if there's a recent data on there.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but they have a page dedicated to it, overstock.com/Bitcoin. .com/Bitcoin. Let me cut.
Yeah, they're using some of the standard things there. At some point, I know at some point that in 2014 they had done $1 million in transactions in 2 months.
So the question becomes, and it's tough. Like when you're in this, like, is this a bubble or is this real? Like people are really going to go to this kind of currency.
There's a lot of things that Bitcoin does that is convenient. It's a lot faster, for instance, to send money around the world with Bitcoin than it is to do it with a wire transfer. It used to also be a lot cheaper because of limitations to the way Bitcoin is implemented. Transaction fees have just skyrocketed to I believe is unsustainable levels.
If you buy some Bitcoin on Coinbase, it's like 5 to 6 days for it to clear because the blockchain is so fucking slow right now.
Most of my transactions go through in an hour.
That's pretty slow too, by the way. But
it's faster than sending money across the planet. Actually, PayPal does things pretty fast sometimes too.
Like if you do any of the online money, like WeChat, and I'm guessing when Apple Cash comes in, it's going to be instant, right?
Yeah, so, yeah, that's true. Actually, a lot of the peer-to-peer monetary platforms like the WeChat one and Venmo. Of course, did you see the thing, the Venmo scam? Wrote about a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, what was it? I don't remember the details.
Dude was depositing money onto Venmo with stolen credit cards and buying iPhones, and then when Venmo caught on to the fact that it was a stolen credit card or a fraudulent credit card, they would withdraw the money from the guy that got paid.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So
it was leaving the people that got paid on the hook for this stuff, and apparently this jackanapes been doing it for quite a while. A lot of the peer-to-peer payment systems where you essentially have cash stored with Apple or WeChat or PayPal/Venmo, and then they're moving that cash around within their own systems. That addresses some of the things that Bitcoin was originally intended to address.
Anyway, so talking about what was kind of interesting was the tax hit on this, in that if you mine this currency from nothing and then you buy some stuff on Overstock, you're not paying any tax on it.
Well, you say that.
Well, the other thing is if you're on Coinbase, they will do a 1099, but then they have a buy and a sell. But if you have this in your local wallet, it's kind of tough. Like, how does anyone know that you made it? It's kind of like if you're paid in euros because you had a job in Europe, right? And when you got paid, the euro was worth $1 even, but now the euro increased and it went to $2. You're not paying tax on the appreciation of that currency in that case, but if you're buying and selling currency like an investor, you will pay tax on it. So it's kind of, there's a gray area there, and it motivates, like, do you hold a local wallet on your machine versus having something up in the cloud like Coinbase where you'll get taxed because you're buying and selling that stuff.
Coinbase specifically reports to the IRS, for one thing.
Right.
So one should know that before getting Coinbase.
GDAX, I assume, does the same thing.
Say again? Yeah, GDAX and Coinbase are the same company.
Right.
So one's a trading platform, one's an online wallet. The online wallet also happens to have the ability to buy and sell, but it's done at a high transaction fees. There are other wallets like blockchain.info where you hold the keys and it's your responsibility, and they're not reporting to the IRS. They're also not buying and selling. You can't buy and sell on blockchain. And then the people behind the mining firm Antminer have something called BTC.com. It's a wallet and trading platform both. That is probably closer to Coinbase than anything else. And then you have a wallet you can have on your Mac or PC, or a wallet you can have on your iPhone, or a hardware wallet where you can actually get a dedicated piece of hardware that's, you know, like say the size of, you know, this or
what do
this.
What do you think if we're starting anew? I guess it depends on how sophisticated a user you are, but I'm starting to suspect like having a local wallet is smart as long as you back it up, because you hear all these horror stories of people like, I forgot my password and I have what is now the equivalent of $5 million worth of Bitcoin that I can't access on my local wallet, right?
Right.
Which is scary.
Well, but that's the same problem with really with Coinbase or with blockchain.info. If you lose your password, you're screwed. With blockchain.info in particular, you hold the keys. The company does not hold the keys, which is a feature, not a bug. And it's one reason why I use blockchain for storing some small amounts of Bitcoin.
Coinbase can't, like, they hold the coins, I thought, for you, so you don't have to maintain that. And if you could, you know, if you lose your login, you just say, you can prove to them, like,
I think you can reset your login with Coinbase, but you need a there's a password and there's a passcode with blockchain, and if you lose your passcode, you can't reset your password.
Solar's boy is saying that you probably owe tax the minute you mine a Bitcoin, but it also presumes, like, a lot of times, you know, there were times when the valuation of Bitcoin, it took so much electric energy for you to mine the coin probably was worth less than the amount you spent generating it. So
yeah, that's, I don't think you owe tax the moment you generate Bitcoin. I think you would only owe tax once you sold it. But I'm not an attorney or an accountant.
Sell it, you could be selling at a loss. Meaning, if it took
yes,
$400 for that month to generate the one coin, and the coin was worth $200 when I sold it, this is
right.
not
that would be a loss. Yeah,
right. So it becomes difficult, and I doubt that the government has instituted policy on this. So that's why I said, like, in the meantime, there's a gray area, and I'm sure that more than a few people are taking advantage of that gray area.
of course. Coinbase, the IRS says that, like, of the 900 and I forget maybe it's not, like, there are thousands and thousands of accounts in the US on Coinbase, and I think 900 of them have declared some kind of Bitcoin related income.
So I guess get kind of rolling. One, first of all, fuck Coinbase, because it was down and buggy and bombing today. You could barely log in. And you know what annoys me about Coinbase is they ask for more information than my goddamn brokerage house does. So they want you to upload a copy of a scan of your driver's license. And I'm thinking, first, fuck you. You're not even Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch doesn't ask that, right? Or neither does Payne Weber and Schwab and all those other guys. They don't ask for that kind of shit. So who the fuck are you? Two, you have got to be the greatest honeypot on the internet. Every hacker on the planet wants to break into fucking Coinbase and steal whatever the fuck is there. On top of it, you're going to have all this personal information in mind. Yeah, thanks. I really need that so much. So
to answer your unstated question, I wouldn't use Coinbase as my long-term storage wallet. The safest thing to do is to use a wallet that you're in total control of, that's local to your system, especially if you've got a lot of money involved. There's also something called a paper wallet, where you simply write down the passcode that is associated with your wallet and put it in the safety deposit box, or, you know, buried under a tree or something like that, in some kind of environmental proof container. The in reality, for me, I don't have enough Bitcoin to truly stress out about it. And I'm pretty comfortable with blockchain.info's approach. I think that they're reasonably secure. But running, I run some altcoin wallets on my Mac, and that's, you know, it's not hard to do. It's just if something happens to your Mac and you don't have a backup, you're screwed.
Anyway, so I guess the other bigger topic, other than shitting on Coinbase for what a horrible system is that they run and the obnoxiousness of the information that they ask for, it's just such a turnoff. I hate them for it. Because I guarantee you that place is broken into. It's not a question of if in my mind, it's just a question of when. It's too much of a honeypot. And that's why I agree with you. I think having a local wallet makes sense. Like you use some service to buy and sell, but then you pull this off into something more secure. Yeah. So do you think this is a bubble?
I have been flabbergasted by the gains in the last 3 weeks in particular, let alone the last 6 months. There's a lot of speculative money in Bitcoin, and that lends itself to the idea that it's a bubble. I kind of heard a friend of mine said, yeah, you know, a buddy of mine has multiple businesses and he's thinking about selling one and putting it all in Bitcoin. Like, oh my God, that's such a bad idea. There is I believe right now there is some stupid money that's entering into Bitcoin, and I don't know where the real floor is. I'm not worried. So before do you remember the fork, the August 1st fork?
I'm vaguely aware of it. Maybe
it might have been August 20th now. I can't remember. Whatever date it was in August. There was a fork, and that's when Bitcoin Cash was created. And I said at the time that Bitcoin within 2 months would probably rise to $5,000, and it did. My other thesis has been that within 2 years, this is going back about 3 months ago, that Bitcoin in 2 years would be at $0 or $20,000, like one of the two. And that it wasn't an insignificant chance that it would be at $0. I can't imagine that we won't have some kind of correction within the next few weeks. I mean, this rise that we've seen has just been so astronomical, so stratospheric, that at some point it's likely to correct. It certainly has corrected every time it's had a big gain in the past. It's always corrected. But the question will be where the floor is. Is the floor at 7? Is the floor at 5? Is the floor at 10? You know, so like it's going to correct from 14 down to 10. Is it going to correct from it dropped $600 or $700 today. So yeah, I don't know. There is a risk. There is a non-trivial risk that we are in the midst of a bubble.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I'm competent enough to say why I think there is a bubble, which is the same reason for the .com bubble. And, you know, you talk about the guy in the grocery line or whatever on the subway saying they want to get in on this. And it's not because like dumb people are getting in on this. I don't blame the average Joe. But once an investment breaches the consciousness of the general public, you have too much demand, right? Everybody wants to get in on it and you have a limited supply. So it artificially increases the value of something, not because of its inherent value, but because just everybody wants to get in on the limited supply of tulips, which makes for crazy tulip pricing, and not because they want to use it or anything like that. And so I think for whatever reason in the last few weeks, Bitcoin has done that. It's like blown into the general consciousness of the public, so everybody wants to get in on some, and it's causing this. But yeah, what is its after the bust, so to speak? What will be its natural level, and is it something that people will actually use moving forward? I think if you get one more major retailer, like if you get an Amazon using this, all of a sudden, I think things change significantly. It's got to be more than Overstock.com is my point.
It does. Amazon would obviously be a huge win. There's so many different camps within the Bitcoin community too. There's the government haters, and then there's the the tech freaks and the paranoid and the the purists. There's the criminal elements. there are a lot of different camps within the Bitcoin community.
But the question is, do they become the fringe that they probably deserve to be, and does there become a mainstream use or not? I think if it goes mainstream, then this is the real deal, you know. And but yeah, I don't know. Interesting stuff. There's something to this, but it needs a real, legitimate, normal use, right?
Well, you know, the big thing to me, John, I was really interested in Bitcoin from the standpoint of microtransactions. So, like the idea that you could affordably send me a nickel for reading an article, right? And that transacting 5 cents or a penny or even a fraction of a penny would be affordable. Bitcoin at one point offered that possibility. Right now, transaction fees, because again, limitations to the way the blockchain is implemented within Bitcoin, make it so that miners can choose to favor only high-paying transactions, which means you got to pay if you want your transaction to count. Right. So the microtransaction right now is not affordable with Bitcoin. It's affordable with other coins, but it's not affordable with Bitcoin. And that's always been one of the most exciting things to me about Bitcoin was the microtransaction.
So, you know, this is a prediction. In the future, just like everyone will have their 15 minutes of fame, everyone will have their own cryptocurrency. And I got that concept from one of our friends on the tech group, Jace. And what happens in a world where everybody starts putting out a cryptocurrency? Like, what becomes the inherent interesting one versus the other, when the value is mostly based on scarcity and demand and not by anything intrinsic other than we've all decided to value this? Although a lot of people can say the same thing about the dollar, but eventually there's a government backing there, right? At least theoretically. So I don't know. I don't know what that means. Like, you know, is Bitcoin the one true coin to rule them all? Will Ethereum come up and supplant it or others? It's the wild, wild west, which makes it super exciting. Like, from a tech, if you're a techie, this is really interesting stuff, because not only is this got techie implications, and to your point, like, you could have microtransaction things. There's a lot of interesting things you could do with the processing payload of Ethereum and whatnot. But it also has, you know, if you don't need banks anymore, if anyone can start their own cryptocurrency, a lot of our societal structures unravel in ways that I don't know what the hell that means. And it's kind of cool from a Fight Club's kind of vantage, you know, what that may mean in the future.
All fair points.
All right. So we've beaten that dead horse. So you think it's at least a local bubble, and time will tell if it's an overall bubble.
I wouldn't call it. I wouldn't put it that way. I would say that there's a non-trivial chance that we are edging towards a bubble, possibly in the midst of one. But that's not the same as saying that I think we're in a bubble.
Okay, I appreciate your pedantic view on this. I will go on record saying that I think we are in a local bubble, and, you know, time will tell if there's.
No, a lot of money is coming in from other parts of the world.
Yep.
So how is that a local bubble?
I don't mean like local geographically. I mean temporarily.
Oh. Okay. What aren't all bubbles temporal?
Well, no, certain things crash like permanently, right? Big parts of the dot-com bubble killed a lot of companies outright, right? They didn't recover. So the question is this will a correction mean just things get priced right, and still in the future, you know, John McAfee put out a tweet. He says, everyone laughed at me when I said that Bitcoin's going to be worth over $500,000 by 2020, And in the model that I predicted, he's like, in 2017, I thought it was going to be only 5,000, and it's ahead of schedule at 10,000, right? So does that mean like it actually has that trajectory and will continue to be valued, or with a correction, in, the next week or two, maybe it'll go down to $3,000, right? Because there'll be some massive sell-off. But at $3,000, it's still a super valuable asset, and
it's actually still up on the year too.
Right. So, and it still may continue on that merry flight path that even John suggested. So it could have a local bubble temporarily and correct heavily and still be super valuable in the future. A lot of things like that happened with the .com bubble. Some things died outright. Some things were corrected harsh, and people said, "Oh, it's ruined," and then it came back.
Well, and the other example of that would be the aforementioned tulip bubble, which was not temporal. It was not local. It was permanent.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think we're headed towards. There is a non-trivial chance that Bitcoin will be worth $0 within the next 2 to 5 years, but it's certainly not a significant chance.
Like pets.com died permanently. Priceline.com got hammered like crazy, and now look at it. It's like a whatever, like a $1,500. I don't even know what it is today, but it's some high valued stock. So I don't know. Like I said, my sense is we're at a local bubble. What the correction is, Lord only knows. And but it remains to be seen whether this is valuable. But my suspicion is it will remain valuable.
Yeah, there's too many things that Bitcoin does that are useful.
Well, I don't know if it's Bitcoin proper, but some cryptocurrencies will be winners. Is in the long term is my gut feeling on that, but we'll see. All right, so topic number
4, right?
No, we just finished 2.
Oh my goodness.
Tesla bubble or die. So for those that haven't seen, Tesla had this awesome announcement. Awesome. I'm gonna get a web page on this. Tesla. So they announced. By the way, this was I don't know. Did you watch? You probably didn't watch the Tesla keynote. That
I wanted to and meant to and never got around to it.
Dude, I'm telling you, it was the most exciting keynote I've seen since the iPhone release. It was electric. So everyone was expecting. Here, let me put on the desktop. Here we go. Everyone was Elon for a long time. Why is it not? Give me your desktop. There we go. For a long time, it was rumored that he was going to release this semi-truck, battery-powered truck. And the specs on this are crazy. Like it has a 0 to 60 time of 5 seconds, which for a semi is ridiculous. And it has a range of 500 miles and can charge with a 400-mile range within 30 minutes. Like these are crazy numbers. The truck is going for actually a not insane price for a truck of $150,000-ish to $180,000 when a regular semi goes for about $100,000. But the cost to operate is supposed to be much more reasonable. But what was awesome is I love Elon's keynotes because he's a just the facts man kind of keynote presenter. He sounds awkward and it's very unpolished, and I think he's generally going off the top of his head, but he gets out the key points, no fluff, and there's no kind of plastic marketing speak like Phil Schiller or Tim Cook would do. It's just like, here's the product, here are the specs, bam, bam, bam. It's like a 2-minute intro. So he releases this, and the truck has a central seating position, kind of like the McLaren F1, which is insane. And it has like this arrow. These side curtains will move to be more flush with the trailer behind it, which makes the drag coefficient of this is the same as a Bugatti Veyron. It's got a 0.36 drag coefficient, which really good for a truck. I mean, it's insanely out of this world for a truck, if you believe these figures. It's just crazy shit on this thing. So everyone was expecting this, And he's like, well, thanks everybody. Glad you came, right? And everyone was kind of oohing on. There was a big crowd there. And then the stage goes dark, and it's like he walks off, and everyone's milling around. And the trucks are kind of moving off in the dark, and then all of a sudden a spotlight turns on again. And he's like, oh yeah. So you know, we had some cargo in the truck, and they opened the back of the truck. And out comes this Roadster, this new Tesla Roadster. And everyone loses their shit. It was such a show me, you know, it's a very different style than Steve Jobs, but it was a very one more thing kind of like, holy fuck. And no one saw this coming. Oh, it was incredible. And the specs on this this Tesla Roadster are insane. The 10,000 Newton meters of torque is kind of bullshit because it's like 7,300 pound-feet of torque, which is probably, well, either it's the most incredible torque in a car ever produced, or he's kind of playing fast and loose with the gearing, since there's a gear on this car. But anyway, this Roadster does 0 to 60, he says, in 1.9 seconds. It has a range of over 600 miles. I think a 620-mile range. It goes to 100 miles per hour in 4.2 seconds.
Wow.
It does a quarter of a mile in 8.9 seconds. The price is $200,000, which for a car of this performance, it just spanked the Bugatti Veyron, the McLarens, every Ferrari looks like a slow slug compared to this car, at least in straight line accelerations. Oh yeah, and the top speed is, he just said, look, I'm not telling you what it is, but it's over 250 miles per hour, which there's like only 3 cars on the planet that do that kind of speed. It's sheer insanity on the specs. Oh yeah, and it's a Roadster, but there's like 2 more seats in the back for very small, probably for kids or really for some luggage kind of
All
thing.
right, don't bore us. Get to the chorus.
Get to the what?
Get to the chorus. What's that's we're not actually talking about the car. We're talking about Tesla.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So that's the background. So he announced those 2 things, and I gotta say, it was the most exciting keynote I've seen, like literally since the iPhone release. It was that exciting. Like, it was just spellbinding. Okay, so here's the uproar. One, everyone always doubts Elon Musk. He's like, all these specs are full of shit. You can't produce a car like this. And they have truckers, and one of the truckers says, this is a shit truck because you don't want to be in a center seat because you're always like, need to get to your window, and you can't get to the window to give paperwork and stuff back, which is actually a legitimate criticism. And he's like, there's no mirrors. He's like, I need mirrors and stuff because, you know, in a truck, you're always like backing up and you could hit people and kill them because you need to know where everything is. And people doubt like the range and that you could charge things as fast. And the question often becomes is, can he deliver? Will he deliver? And a lot of people are incomprehensibly, in my opinion, irrationally hateful of him. And I'm like, all right, this is a guy that, one, launched his rockets when everyone said he couldn't. 2, he built a reusable rocket when the major governments of Earth have failed for over 50 years to do so. He did launch an electric car company and built
and shipped
it and built a supercharger, a whole infrastructure for this worldwide. He did deliver on these things. Is this really the guy you want to bet against?
He's got the tunnel going too.
So he's doing a lot of things. So people act like he never delivers, and it's true. He sometimes delivers late. He sometimes you know, puffs things up, but he always manages to get to those eventually. And then the criticism, this is irrational too. He's like, he's a shit businessman. He never invests his own money. And I'm like, dude, you understand that those 2 things are actually contradictory. If you manage to use other people's fucking money because you're so good at negotiating with the governments that you get them to beat the shit out of each other that they give you free money, you're an awesome businessman.
Yeah, and he has used his own money. On top of that, on top of that being a silly argument, he actually has used his own money anyway.
So this is there's a YouTube video, and if I could find it, I'll link to it. But this story is actually incredible, and there's two things that really touch me about Elon Musk. When he was doing SpaceX before he had a successful launch, he had all the old NASA guys that were his heroes shit on this guy, and he did a 60-minute interview. And you know, Elon always seems to me like he's like on the edge of being autistic, like. But the guy got choked up and he was like starting to cry, and he's like, I just wish one of these guys would come here just once to look at what I've been building. Because they're like, they were shitting on him, like saying, who does he think he is? NASA should be doing this stuff. He can't just come in and just do this. It's kind of like when the telecons came in and said, who does Apple think is? They think they're just going to walk into the phone industry? Well, apparently, fuck yeah, that's exactly what they did. And he was so hurt because those guys were his heroes. And hopefully, you know, they've changed their mind because. So anyway, that's one background piece. And the other part that was touching, he did this interview. And so there was a crunch. People don't remember. So the Tesla first released an initial Roadster, and it was like a modified Lotus, Elise. I think it was Elise, yeah, where they stack a bunch of shitty batteries in it. And it was a, you know, very small volume car, but it was to get things going. And then they still hadn't released the Model S, which is their 4-door sedan, which is a very expensive but very nice sedan, and it's their current model that they're selling along with the Model X, which is an SUV version of the Model S, basically. So as part of this transition, he's like, we need a new plant. We need to not just make this kind of kit car, which was the Roadster, but we need to make a real production car, or at least the more production than we've ever done. And there's a lot of infrastructure to build for that. And so this is what happens. They stop selling the Roadster, their only form of income. And they go for over a year not selling any product. They didn't have a Model S ready to sell. And that's a pretty bad fucking mistake, right? Like to have no income and huge expense and build out. So during that time, that company is sucking wind, and he basically has to go panhandling and begging people to get him money. At the same time, he's trying to launch the rockets in SpaceX, and he had 3 rockets blow up. And the problem with that is he budgeted that for only 3 launches. He assumed the first 2 had a very high degree of blowing up, but then the third one blows up, and he has no money in SpaceX. And this happens simultaneously. There's the cash crunch at SpaceX. There's no more money for a 4th launch. And then there's zero money coming in a Tesla. And he made a ton of money because he was one of the founders of the company that was the predecessor to PayPal, basically PayPal. He took all his profits, was around $100 million, and he put every last cent of it, and he still didn't have enough money. He went panhandling. It's a good kind of panhandling, by the way, to have friends like this, to all his multi-millionaire friends, begging for loans so he could fund enough of Tesla so it doesn't go bankrupt, and SpaceX to fund one more flight. He is in so his net worth is now negative. He's not only put in every cent he's ever had, he's taken debt from buddies. Like, so he's underwater, beyond underwater. Now think of the balls you have to go on this. I've just sent up 3 rockets. They've all blown up. But the 4th one is for sure, right?
The 4th one stayed up.
And the 4th one goes up. And soon after the 4th, when that went up and it supplied the space station, they finally got the Model S starting to ship. So the cash crunch ended. And it's true, after this success, since then, everyone is fighting, like, please build the Tesla plant here, right? Everyone's and the governments are saying, here, we'll give you crazy money, we'll give you crazy incentives, we'll give you crazy loans. But he'd be an idiot not to take that. So good for him. And yeah, he hasn't done that since. But when people criticize, like, how he doesn't put his own money, he's like, this is a guy that had over $100 million and went down to the bone.
Okay, yeah, it's just it's factually incorrect to say that he doesn't put in his own money. So let's leave that. Right. Let's leave that there. So the question is whether or not Tesla is experiencing some kind of bubble, and I would say no. And I think that the truck is aimed at autonomous driving more than drivers, so that the truckers getting to the window don't matter all that much.
Well, but for now, the truckers are the market, right? There's still truckers that are going to be transporting this, and they haven't had a
no, the market. I think the market for that truck are the companies who want to replace their drivers.
No, not the current model as he is selling it. It's not.
Well, he's not selling it yet. He showed it, right?
He took orders. The orders, people have been placing orders, and it's definitely. It has the same autonomous system as the current Tesla, which is not fully autonomous. It still needs a person. You're probably right. The end game is that, but for now, it's got to actually appeal to real truckers, or to trucking companies that use real truckers still, right? So one, I don't think like betting, like a lot of people talk about now. The weight of the Roadster, by the way, is going to be laughable, right? Because it's going to be a pig. Like a good sports car, a reasonable sports car, like a Corvette or something, is around 3,300 pounds. And that's a pretty, that's a big, kind of a biggish sports car.
Mm-hmm.
A Roadster like a Miata weighs around 2,600 pounds. This is probably going to be way over 4,000 pounds.
What's your McLaren weigh?
My car weighs 3,100 pounds.
Less than a Miata. Your car weighs less. No, that's like
around 2,800.
Got it.
Yeah, that's with full fuel. Like a lot of people play games like Ferrari's, like, oh, our car weighs 2,800 pounds. Yeah, bone dry with no oil or fuel or anything like that. Like you have to, actually have a curb weight on there. So you're not going to take this on the track because it's a huge pig. It will drive well for what it is. But Tesla's notoriously, like, people take Model S's because they're super fast in a straight line, but they literally cannot finish a single lap of a track because the batteries overheat and it goes into limp mode. Because battery output, the lithium ion will literally catch fire and blow if you're at 100% capacity for over like a minute or two. So you can't, you usually need, I don't know, 2-ish minutes to get around the track. And these things go into limp mode like within 30 seconds. They're good at bursts, but they're not electric cars, but they're not good at sustained output because of the nature of the batteries, not the nature.
I'm hearing from one of your friends, by the way, about how any criticism of Elon Musk just put you on megatilt.
That's not true. I mean, I think there are fair things to criticize him about, but he's a guy that's accomplished more than, like he's in very refined company. The dude honestly, the major governments of this earth have wanted to make a reusable rocket and have failed for a long time. And he did it. He has a rocket. Not only does it land and is reusable, he lands it on a goddamn barge that's moving in the frickin' ocean. Like this is a tough problem for. And then I hear people in aerospace, they say, well, we could have done that in the 70s, but we decided it wasn't economically viable or whatever. And I'm like, it's funny. It's funny when it's somebody else doing it, it's no big deal. When I do it, when it's my time, my energy, my money, dude, you don't know how fucking valuable that shit is. What's the big deal? Elon Musk managed to make a reusable rocket and land on a thing. We could have done that. Sure, you could have. You didn't. And no one else did. And people were trying for a long time. And that's what gets me is like, there's very fair things to criticize on this guy. Like, tables are ridiculous. He's not an ideal human being. Neither was Steve Jobs. But he has major fucking accomplishments. And he risked more than any of us have ever risked for this kind of thing. As far as personal wealth, I mean, it'd be a good problem to have $100 million to risk, but nonetheless, he did it. And so you got to give the person his due. And again, the arguments are rational. Like when you say he's a bad businessman, but I'm like, he's getting free money from the government.
Listen, stop, because you're right. It's calling him a bad businessman is factually incorrect. Saying he didn't invest his own money is factually incorrect. So we don't need to defend that. It's just wrong.
So the question becomes, but right now, Tesla is burning money at an incredible rate because, and Elon noted this, he's like, I'm going into production hell because he released a Model 3 and it's kind of the Volkswagen of electric cars, right? It's finally a car, because the Model S,
it's not quite the Volkswagen of, it's still expensive.
The price range, like the original Roadster was over $130,000. The Model S, their sedan, averages probably for around $80,000 to $100,000 and could go up to $130,000. It's very high. The Model X, their SUV with the Falcon doors, is also over, like a lot of them are around $100,000. So this car, the very entry-level version with a kickback from the government, promises to be $35,000, and I guess probably reasonably equipped versions of it are going to be around $45,000. So it's not like every person can get it, but
yeah, that's not the Volkswagen. It's still expensive for a whole lot of people, but it is like one of the cheapest electric cars.
So yes, and it becomes attainable by more mere mortals than everyone. In some sense, it's the Apple of cars, right? It's not going to compete with a $14,000 Kia, but it's something that is obtainable by people for a significantly larger portion of people. To do this production, he had 400 or 500,000 pre-orders. People want this car, and he wants to build an infrastructure that lets them build 500,000 cars a year. And before he built this, he says, look, I'm going to be going through production hell. This is going to be tough. And so he's behind schedule because he was supposed to ship 2,000 cars in December, or 20,000 in November, and he only shipped 2,000 or whatever it was. And he's behind. This is not unreasonable. And people are like so ready to dig a grave for a guy that's doing something that's really massive and it's never been done on this scale for this.
Yeah, people hate on Tesla in many ways, in the same way that Apple was hated on when Apple was when Apple was still growing.
Right. And it's to the point of irrational. Is my point. So look, they're burning money and they're clearly having a cash crunch. And he was very smart. He sold pre-orders of Founder's version of this Tesla Roadster, which won't be released till 2020, if that, right? Because he runs behind schedule a lot of times. And he's taking $250,000 full paid deposits. So he's getting a $250 million basically interest-free loan from people for
$250 million.
Yeah, because he's selling $250,000 Founder Edition Roadsters.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah,
and it's it's fully signed up as far as I know at this point. So it's great. It's as a business person, questionable whether or not you want to put in $250,000 for a car sight unseen for.
I would imagine that the kind of people that were doing that could probably afford it.
Exactly. This is my point. It's like people are like, "Oh, you're getting robbed off." I'm like, "You're getting ripped off." I'm like, the kind of person that can afford a $250,000 car sight unseen 2.5 years in advance is probably competent to work on things without your advice.
Ancient Alien said that he wished Tesla would produce a sporty-looking, affordable electric vehicle.
The Model 3 actually isn't bad. And you know what's interesting about the Model 3, especially the base model? It only weighs 3,500 pounds, which in some ways makes it the sportiest Tesla that Tesla will have for quite a while.
And I would imagine that things like that will come in time.
Well, it's a question of battery density. If he's using lithium ion of the kind that he currently uses, a 200 kilowatt battery in the Roadster is going to be well over 4,000. The weight of the batteries are going to be like over 2,500 pounds alone. If he manages to get a new like lithium air type battery in there where the density is much better, he might have a completely different thing going on. So that remains to be seen. These things haven't been released for a while. But my point is, I think it's very legitimate that people criticize, like, this is a cash flow crunch time for the company and it's something to worry about. But are you betting against this guy who's...
I'm not betting against Elon Musk. I'm not betting against Elon Musk, and I'm not betting against Tesla.
Right. So, is it a bubble for the stock? If anything, I'll tell you, I think, especially since the stock has gone down to only around 300 right now, it's a buying opportunity. Because think about this: if he succeeds, what happened? Right now, there's, I don't know, say 50,000 Teslas out there because they're all multi-$100,000 cars, right? If all of a sudden, let's say he's grossly inaccurate by the 500,000. If he starts selling 250,000 Teslas a year, and within a few years you have 1 million electric cars on the road, and think of the infrastructure build out he has to have for chargers for that. Our culture starts to substantially change because all of a sudden more people are buying solar-ish stuff for their homes, for how they charge things, for where they charge things. And our infrastructure really starts to change dramatically from the oil-based infrastructure it is. Not all overnight, it takes years and years, but that is a major impact to our culture, to how people charge, to how people get fuel and gas, and how they live their life on a daily basis. That is profound. And Tesla's making money on the battery side. That may increase sales of their Solar City solar panel side, and on the car side as well, and on the trucking side stuff. So all of a sudden, why would Tesla not have its own fleet of trucks that it rents out for autonomous driving?
Ride sharing is the future.
Why does Tesla need Uber if they're making the baseline thing? They can make an app like Uber.
Yep. All day long.
All of a sudden, all these things start to have a network effect with one another because it's changing society. And all of a sudden, that $300 stock price and $50 billion valuation that you say is crazy compared to GM.
I didn't say that.
Look, it's crazy.
I didn't say that. Don't put that.
Well, a lot of people.
Okay.
And it's a
well, you know, it's like Tim Cook said a few months ago. He said that the automobile industry had three interesting things happening right now: electrification, autonomous vehicles, and ride sharing. And his intimation was that Apple was going to be at the juncture of those three things. Whether or not Apple is going to be at the juncture of those three things are going to fundamentally shape and change the automobile industry. They're going to change our lives. They're going to change how much space we dedicate to storage of cars that aren't being used, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I would imagine that Tesla will be one of the players in that market.
Apple should have bought Tesla. As a matter of fact, they should still buy Tesla. But I digress. All right, shall we go to our last 3.5?
Yes.
Oak Island.
I have a
So you saw.
Right. So spoiler alerts. We're talking about the episode that was just shipped last night on Tuesday.
Actually, last two episodes, because that we didn't talk about the episode prior to it. Which the important thing is, they did the micro drilling grid that they were putting out, and one of the micro drilling grid hit metal casing, and they were pulling up metal chunks, which sounds an awful lot like they might be entering a vault. And I keep fearing when they keep poking through, like if there was which one called an Ark of the Covenant, they're going to drill through that too.
Yep.
But anyway, so that was the big cliffhanger for me. And then this last episode was not about that, which frustrated me.
Well, but I think it should. Sorry, I got a message.
Because what they talked about in this last episode was, unfortunately, there was a fella that was injured.
Yes, someone got injured, and that's awful. He joked about he could have been the seventh person to die. I thought that was a ballsy joke to make, and it was
a ballsy joke to make.
The it could have all have been the editing, but the guy he said that to certainly looked uncomfortable at the statement.
The guy he said it to, he's like, that's a pessimistic way to see it. I'm like, no, I see that as optimistic because he didn't die.
Because he didn't die, right? So you had mentioned, so spoiler alerts. So we are going to talk about these episodes, these two episodes. But the episode that came on the 28th, Tuesday the 28th, you said you were pretty disappointed by it. I have to say that I thoroughly love them finding the old cap gun for Ricky. What's his last name? Rustalt?
Yeah, I forget. I think you're right, because it's the whole, I guess, Rustalt family that lost the dad and Ricky's brother
in an accident.
And that guy looked like on the edge of crying.
Yeah, and they found his little cap gun, and I thought it was super touching. You're as much of a curmudgeon as you tend to appear. You have like just the biggest heart towards lovely and touching gestures and things that people do for each other. It always delights me how affected you are by such things. I just thought that was super cool that they found this guy's gun. that said, I know that we were being manipulated because they made it seem like, you know, they find the gun and then Rick Restalt and his sister show up like it all happened like in a few days, and that's not the case.
Well, even regardless of that, I did find it. Yeah, I mean that dude was, and he has a right to be. I mean, like, he was robbed of his brother, which and
his father,
which is just the pits of the earth, and that, you know, that scumbag island took it from him. So I could see why you just like this place.
Yeah.
I didn't give a shit about the gun per se, but it was just more, I really felt for that guy, you know, and him kind of reliving. I hope what he said was true. It seemed to be like he mentioned it reminded him of his first summer there, where that tragedy hadn't happened. It was a nice memory, and
yeah,
I hope it was a warm one for him to relive that.
For sure.
So as much as I like that, though, you can't leave me on a fucking cliffhanger when finally we're getting to something, and then you're like, fucking let's go down this side rail. I don't want to.
Here's my theory.
The treasure.
Here's my theory. The fact that they didn't make a big deal when they pulled up wood on Tuesday's episode, they pulled up the metal a week ago, right? And all this stuff took place months ago during the summer. Timeline speaking, but the thing that gives me hope is that they haven't made a big deal about those.
This show, biggest cock tease show on the
absolutely, and it's always like every time they do it, wood from 150 feet down. Could this be the
ancient aliens?
Yeah, it could be ancient, right? It's the same guy. The fact that they showed some of this stuff being pulled up and then didn't immediately try to make us think that this was it. They finally found the thing, and that they're finally going to reveal stuff, and they're finally just, you know, the search is complete. The fact that they didn't do that this time makes me think they might have actually found something.
I need to know. I need to know what's in that metal casing. I need to know it yesterday. So that's why I was disappointed, because I'm like, oh, we're going to see what's in this, like, something, gold on the drill bill. Something's got to come out of this freaking thing. So yeah, they teased us last episode, is my point. So good stuff.
But they didn't tease us. They didn't tease. What do you think of my theory? My theory is that them not making a big deal about it may mean that it's actually a big deal that they're saving.
So I agree. It's kind of, it's potentially cool, but you know, this show has played Lucy to our whatchamacallit, Charlie Brown many times before.
This is true. This is true. this is absolutely true. Anyway, nonetheless, I'm enjoying this season a lot. It's been good. You know, it's clear, by the way, they're making a lot of money from the show because they're pouring development resources into milking it for everything it's got.
Well, these guys, you know, it's funny. I was actually impressed that their spend last year was so low. They only spent $2 million last year.
That's nothing for 10 episodes.
Well, yeah. So you're right. Like the show is probably helping them finance this, and thank goodness, good for them. It pissed me off when Canada was like, you can't. Where the government's like, you need to get this person to do it, and those guys are like, are you kidding me? Like, the assholes before me totally like shit bombed this thing like it was a war zone, and you're telling me I can't run a fucking metal detector and pick shit up off the ground? Fuck Canada. Fuck those bureaucratic cunts. They're such nice guys, because even though they were upset, they're like, well, I guess this is for the better good. I'm like, no, fuck those cunts. Fucking do nothing motherfuckers, not involved in anything, not spending a cent of their mind, but they're like, we need to tell you how to do this because it's gotten popular. Fucking assholes. Fuck that government. Fuck those bureaucrats. Fuck Canada.
I just got another message from a friend who I affected. Anyway, someone I sucked into becoming a sealing wax junkie like me. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. All right, listen, we've gone on long, so let's wrap it up in the words of the fabulous Thunderbirds.
We'll say your goodbyes and I'll say mine.
All right, brother. Had a good time this week, man.
I did too. And on those popular topics, we'd like to thank you and see you next time.
Yeah, thanks to everybody that participated in the conversation. We very much appreciate that, and we hope to see you next week.